There it hangs, suspended in gloom, glowing dimly in darkness. A beacon there to inform us that there is always a way out. But don't go just yet. We have such wonderful things to show you. This is the Exit Light Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Exit Light Podcast. I am your storyteller, Eli Beals. Have you ever tried to impress someone in the interest of becoming further acquainted? Maybe you find yourself a fun new hobby or a complete shift in perspective as a result. Isn't it a little contrived, though, to manufacture a shared interest like that? And what if this thing is so beyond your understanding that you inadvertently cause undue harm? This story asks two questions. What happens when a god goes online? And are you afraid of spiders? And so I present to you Anansi's Web. Anansi's Web by Eli Beals. I was in love with this girl, and as I sit writing this, I can't help but feel responsible for what happened. So I'm just gonna put this out there, because I know that they will see it. Maybe someone that can stop them will. I'm not what you'd call a technophile. My understanding of how the internet works is maybe average. Like I know to never click on links and emails from people I don't know. Phishing scams and shady websites that keylog and scrape personal data in order to access personal finances, or worse, one's identity. Jen was the expert, and my interest in these things stemmed purely from my interest in her. I thought that if I could share in her passion, then maybe that passion would blossom into something more physical between us. It was really the only thing we had in common, and for a while, I wasn't even sure she was into guys. I met her almost a year ago in a cafe. She was wearing a tattered post-punk band shirt, a thick black beanie, torn black jeans, and thick-soled boots studded with steel rivets. Her face illuminated in the glow of her laptop, covered in stickers that gave off this whole anarchist hacker vibe. She commented on the book I was reading, which surprised and delighted me. The book was, of course, Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. Eventually, we exchanged information, and from then on we were kind of an item. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company. I suppose that was enough, and pushing for more intimate exchange would have somehow ruined what we had together. I don't know. I could listen to her expound on the singularity and her plans to be a red hat for hours. I would rarely have anything to contribute, but maybe I helped her define her purpose by way of being the thing she could bounce her ideas off of. I would ask her questions regarding the moral implications of the things she posed. She would smile and thank me for keeping her grounded that way. Yes, her particular area of interest could have been very lucrative, and she did benefit monetarily from it, but it seemed merely a means to obtain the things she needed for her work. I asked her once if she wanted to be rich. She snorted and replied that she was rich. She had everything she wanted, she said, while meeting my gaze in a way that melted me like butter on the pan. Then I stumbled across a genuine oddity. On an IRC server, I found something called Anansi. The comment that began the long thread was about a sentient program prowling the dark web. This resulted in the usual degenerate spiral of personal assessments of each other's intelligence and sexual preferences. And yes, people still use IRCs, internet relay chats, where people can communicate instantly through custom servers. But most importantly, it's near impossible to trace any individual user, which makes it ideal for anyone interested in topics that would usually get them flagged by your usual 3-letter agencies. The URL was a ridiculously long series of alphanumerics and symbols, which couldn't be accessed through a normal browser. At least that's what I could tell with my limited experience on the matter. It would kick me to a blank page that read 403, forbidden. Curious and out of my depth, I decided to bring it to Jen. At first, she was dubious. Then I could tell it was something that demanded her attention because she leaned forward into the screen, her brows clenched to an almost solid line of intense focus. If she had a baseball cap on, this is when she would have turned it backwards. With a surprised yelp, she jumped back away from the screen, so I leaned over to see what was happening. On the screen, there was a spider, moving in that way they often do that seems so unnatural, skittering quick motions that the eye never seems fast enough to track. It sat facing us, its multitude of eyes glittering in the bright white light. It seemed to be looking at us. Then, quick as a blink, it rushed the screen. As if colliding physically, the view shook with its impact, its quill-bristled legs scrabbling against the barrier. We both stared in wide-eyed wonder at this. The effect was quite impressive. Jen gave me a light punch on the arm, saying how that scared the shit out of her. I laughed and said I had no idea what it would do. She then minimized the window and began running some script that seemed to be pulling data from the site. Lots of data. Her eyes tracked the rapid descending code, and then they widened with an uttered expletive. She hit a command that halted whatever it was doing. The spider had moved back a bit and was beginning to weave a web, pulling gossamer from its spinneret, skillfully relaying it to its hooked extremities, creating a net that spanned the window it was in. She bit her lower lip while huffing through her nose in irritation. I asked her what was wrong. She didn't reply and continued her task, and eventually threw up her hands in agitation. She glared at me then, and pulled the battery out of the laptop. She said it was bricked, as in, as useful as a brick now. I had led her to a nasty virus that was systematically injecting its code into all of her device's subroutines, tiny packets that propagate and effectively cocoon all functionality. She had never seen anything like it. And by the way, I owed her $700 for a new laptop. As we left the cafe, she tossed the remains of her brick into a waste bin just outside the entrance without a second look back. I'm pretty sure her irritation was not entirely directed at me, more so at the new conundrum set before her. Maybe I should have just told her to leave it alone. Then again, knowing her, it would have only fed fuel to the fire. She had to crack this thing. There was nothing I could do to stop or even help her. So we parted ways with an awkward hug and a promise for compensation. For a second, I thought maybe that was the moment we would kiss. But her phone interjected with its insufferable bad timing. I usually wake up just before dawn to get in a little cardio before heading into work. Our cafe is sort of a halfway point on my route. But the next morning, I was dismayed to see the windows were dark. Weird, I thought as I drew closer. Maybe they were remodeling. No, the windows were not just dark. They were entirely shrouded by thick webbing, and silhouetted through this veil I could see dark, spindle-legged lumps that began to move in response to my approach. Revulsion rose like a cold spout of slush in my guts. as I realized that this place was completely infested with these massive spiders. I backed up in a panic, brushing away invisible tendrils of imagined threads. That's when I saw the waste bin, wrapped in a thick cloud of web, pulsing like a lazy heart. I thought of the spider that she conjured on her laptop, and the web it was spinning. It could not have been a coincidence. I needed to call Jen, but my phone was at home, so with added urgency I sprinted back as fast as I could with images of Jen wrapped in gauzy spider silk, her eyes blank and staring. Please God, no, I thought, as I bounded up the stairs to my unit. Even the simplest tasks are near impossible to do in a state of adrenaline-charged terror. I misclicked her name a few times before finally seeing the call screen. I must have hit the video call icon, and after a few ticks the call connected. Her face filled the screen from a weird, upward angle, as if she were lying down, staring up at the ceiling, holding the phone upright on her sternum. The camera light glinted brightly on her septum piercing. She was alive. I could see her nostrils flaring as she drew in sharp, tremulous breaths, but I could not see her eyes. Streaks of dark eyeliner trailed down her cheeks. I called her name over and over again, but the view didn't change, and then faintly, I heard her voice, though her lips did not move. She was saying something, the same word, again and again, so faintly that all I could guess was the name Nancy. What that had anything to do with, though, I could not at that time guess. I hated to have to hang up on her, but it was clear that this was an emergency. In the last split second, the view shifted slightly, and what I thought I saw as the image collapsed was a tall figure standing in the doorway. My next call was 911. And through my frantic ravings, they discerned the situation in a manner both reassuring and a little surprising. They assured me help was on its way. I relaxed a bit and sprinted off towards Jen's place. By the time I got to her place, the fire response and EMTs had already gone. Behind were a few police cars and a hazmat truck. Tenants from her building were all standing across the road, looking displaced, curious, and very worried. The police were there to keep people behind the yellow tape. The ones in the head-to-toe protective gear entered and exited Jen's unit. Permeating this atmosphere of alarm was a faint aroma of acrid chemicals. Bug spray, I thought. My heart sank as I approached the officer nearest the crowd, thinking the worst as he shook his head at me gravely. I told him I was the one who had called them and wanted to know about Jen and if she was okay. His eyes went from me to the unit still bustling with activity, then said I should speak to the hazmat team as they might have some questions for me. It was a few hours until I was being led down a brightly lit hallway to an operating room to see her through the glass. I don't know how long I stood there, watching her in this state, wrapped in bandages, tubes protruding from just about everything. They sent me away with the knowledge that a minute or two longer without medical attention would have meant death or a permanent vegetative state. It would be another 3 weeks before I was able to see her again. Behind her smile as she watched me enter was something I had been dreading. It wasn't blame. It was more like something close to resignation, as if she had made a decision that had been long on her mind. Perhaps the question was clear on my face because she began to relate what she remembered. Her quarantine framework wasn't enough, and they broke through the barriers she had placed. They had literally broke through. Her voice wavered at the memory of it. Huge spiders dashing themselves against the screen until it cracked and spilled into her room. She tried to get away, but she tripped and fell, and soon felt them at her feet, then over her back, and then searing, writhing pain everywhere. So much pain, and all she could think of to do was call someone, anyone, but she couldn't move. All she could do was stare at the ceiling as if she felt herself being devoured by these monsters. "No," I said. "I was the one who called her." But who answered if she was unable to? I asked her if it was this Nancy I heard her repeating. She seemed to shrink into herself then, as I mentioned the name. She said it wasn't Nancy, that it was something or someone called Anansi, and if I could do her a favor and not look for him. She made me promise, her face pained and deadly serious. I, of course, promised, if only to relieve her of any stress about it. This kind of talk seemed to exhaust her, so I left, patting an unbandaged spot on her hand. She doesn't blame me, I know, but at the same time I cannot help but blame myself all the same. They say you are never more than 8 feet from a spider at any given time, which may be true, but lately I have been extra aware of shadowed corners and overhangs, sensing a multitude of glittering black eyes upon me, as if waiting for me to break my promise to Jen. I think we all want to feel accepted by those we admire and feel attracted to, and find ways to connect with them so that they'll notice us. I am guilty of this, of course. In high school, I joined the drama club just to gain the approval of a certain person. While my opinions on such clubs have certainly turned around, that one was perhaps second in unpopularity next to the chess club. I was kind of a jock. Can you believe that? I was not a star athlete by any means, but I did get to strut around on game days sporting my football jersey, so the label stuck, I suppose. In my hubris, I assumed that I was the coolest one there, so I acted the part, which just made me look like a jackass, and yet still managed to gain the affection I desired. But it crumbled when she realized who and what I was. A liar. In the wise words of Tyler Durden, sticking feathers up your butt does not make you a chicken. So be yourself. Maybe you will discover some genuine connections as a result. Because otherwise, you may cause them to be nearly killed by a spider god on the dark web. And that's not good. Until next time, good night.